Hello everyone and welcome to a short detour from the Sanremo saga of 1930. We have a game that was played yesterday in Bundesliga and we have a match Solingen versus St. Pauli. Max Warmerdam faces world champion, co-world champion, co-world blitz champion Magnus Carlsen. In a game that can only be described as as if it was played in the style of the old masters. And they play a very, very rare line, one that hasn't been played for many, many years. Last time it was played, it was in 1980 between Walter Brown and Yuri Balashov. But Magnus adds a very special twist on that game. So let's check it out. Max has the white pieces and he opens with pawn to c4. He goes for the English opening. Magnus strikes with e5, grabs the center. We have pawn to g3 and pawn to g6. We have pawn to d4 and pawn to d6. We have knight to f3, knight to d7 by Magnus, and knight to c3. We have bishop to g7, Magnus fianchettoing his bishop, bishop to g2, and knight g2 f6. So both players going for the standard developing lines. This is the Karlsbremen line. Of the English, we have castles, and here we have queen to c2 by Max, rook to e8 by Magnus, and now rook to d1. And much more common here is pawn to c6, but Magnus goes for the active pawn to e4, knight to e1. Other moves can be considered, of course, knight to d2 also playable and has been played, knight to g5 likewise played, but here we have knight to e1, and Magnus goes knight to b6. And the question is, why is Magnus giving up the e4 pawn? Well, he's not. If Max goes after the pawn, for example, knight captures, bishop captures, then Magnus had in mind knight captures on c4, and the queen cannot keep an eye on the c4 pawn and on the bishop on e4. And while you could maybe try to complicate further with something like bishop captures, and queen captures, yes, you have won a pawn, but you no longer have a light square bishop, and Magnus has the fianchettoed bishop pair, and also, I mean, look at this light square bishop. That is not worth a pawn. That is most certainly not worth a pawn. Even though the engine will say it's equal, no one is playing this. So after knight to b6, we have pawn to c5. Again, it's not a new move. It has been played only once in that game we've mentioned, and the game follows the exact game of Walter Brown versus Yuri Balashov. We have knight b to d5. We have a trade, c captures on d6, queen captures on d6, and now in that game, Walter Brown played queen to b3, and he lost that game. But here we have bishop to g5 by Max, and it is now as of move 13 that we have a completely new game. And it seems like a pretty standard position where Magnus should just play bishop to f5 and maybe something like e3. The game continues. Bishop to f5 is even the second move recommended by the engine, but Magnus actually goes for the top move recommended by the engine, even though it looks like a move you shouldn't play, and that is the move from the thumbnail, pawn to e3. And this just it doesn't matter what the engine says. You know that if this is playable, you've done something wrong. And the point being, how do you face it? Do you play f3, f4, bishop captures on e3, f captures on e3? Many ways you can play it, but if you play bishop captures, that means the e4 pawn can no longer move, and bishop to f5 is now just very strong. Next to capture on e3, you'll mess up white's pawn structure, and you will be very happy. Another thing after pawn to e3, f captures on e3 can be played, but now after knight captures on e3, for example, bishop captures and rook captures, again, looks very, very bad for white. Bishop to f5 is coming, rook to e8 is coming, and black will be much better. So after this pawn to e3 move, we have pawn to f3, for the moment allowing the pawn to remain, hoping to attack it afterwards. And now Magnus plays knight captures on c3, b captures, and knight to d5, attacking the putting pressure on c3 pawn, but basically inviting pawn to c4, because if you don't play pawn to c4, then pawn to b5 is coming, and you're never going to be able to play pawn to c4 for the rest of the game, and this will be a weakness. So here, pawn to c4, but now not the immediate knight to b4 as you might expect, rather pawn to h6. And this is where Magnus says that he's just straight out better, because the bishop has no squares. You have to allow the trade. If you move the bishop, then of course the knight will just move to b4, attack the queen, and next you're gonna trap the bishop with g5. So Max has the trade. He plays c captures on d5, h captures on g5, and now rook 8 to c1, putting pressure on that c7 pawn, and Magnus just goes bishop to f5. inviting the capture on c7. But if you play queen captures on c7, then queen captures on d5, and well, Magnus is just very happy here. So instead we have queen to b3, putting pressure on the b7 pawn, and rook 8 to b8. We have queen to c4, again putting pressure on that c7 pawn, and now Magnus just goes rook b to d8. He says, you can have the c7 pawn, I'm just going to capture on d5. So Max plays pawn to f4, he defends the d5 pawn and is now ready to capture on c7, and Magnus plays g captures on f4. We have queen captures on c7, f captures on g3. Also, other moves are possible. For example, if you go queen to a6, this is just very, very strong for Magnus, even stronger than captures on g3. Point being that if queen captures on f4 now, the e2 pawn has been attacked by the queen, and now you just have a pass pawn on e3 and a completely winning position. But okay, Magnus went for a bit of a different line. F captures on g3, queen captures on d6, rook captures on d6, and h captures on g3, and now he goes rook to a6, saying that he's very happy with this endgame. The bishop pair is, of course, stronger than this knight-bishop combo. And you could go for something like rook to a1 to defend. You cannot go rook e2, you cannot go rook c2. Rook a1 just looks weird, and the b pawn starts marching forward. So here we have bishop to f3, and now bishop to f8 by Magnus. The rook captures on a2 is also playable right away. For some reason, Magnus decides to activate the dark square bishop first. We have pawn to g4, bishop to e4, and now rook to c7, going after the b7 pawn, and also hoping maybe to double up on the 7th rank. And if you can do that, could be very, very good. But again, with the bishop on f8, doesn't seem like a viable plan. So Magnus plays rook captures on a2, and now king to f1. The problem with rook captures on b7 is that you capture on f3 and you remove the defender of the e2 pawn. So now you might as well capture with the e pawn, and now bishop to d6, and this is just, well, unplayable for white. Also, king g7 can be played, rook to h8, and well, sorry, that's a weird arrow, but yeah, you get the idea. So after rook captures on a2, king to f1 was played, and now comes rook to d2 by Magnus, trying to get the rooks off the board and also get his pawn to d2. So rook back to a1, now putting pressure on the a7 pawn, and rook captures on d4. We have rook captures on a7, and now Magnus plays bishop captures on d5. And this is, I guess Magnus had to calculate this very precisely, but also he has 30 minutes on the clock. Max is below 1 minute, but a beautiful idea would be rook to d1. I'm just going to show it because, like I said, it's very nice. And after rook captures on b7, bishop captures on f3, and after e captures e2 with check, and after king to f2, look at this, bishop to d6. I mean, this would really be a wonderful idea. You allow rook captures on f7, and it seems like you're almost giving white a perpetual. But after rook captures on f7, now you throw in bishop c5 check, and this is the key move. After king to g3, bishop to d4, guarding the g7 square, and now there's nothing you can do. The knight is hanging. If you move the knight, you can just win the knight, e1 queen. The knight has to be sacrificed, and then you have two rooks and a bishop versus two rooks, with the bishop guarding g7, so there is absolutely nothing white can do here. So that would be a fun way to do it, but Magnus played bishop captures on d5 also requires you to calculate a lot, and but unfortunately, Max has only 1 minute on the clock. So he just recaptured bishop captures, but an interesting maneuver would have been rook to d7, as it says, all right, you're not going to lose your bishop. Then Magnus would have to play bishop c5, attack the rook, and after, look at this, bishop captures on d5, not capture the rook right away because of bishop captures on f7 with check, followed by captures, and then the rook is defended. But first, rook f4 check. And look at this now, king g1 and bishop captures on a7, and now the f7 pawn is defended. So, well, obviously Magnus calculated all of this, but after bishop captures on d5, Max did not challenge him to it. He played bishop captures on d5, now just threatening on f7, and rook captures on d5. We have king to g2, Magnus played rook to d2, and now king to f3, and here Magnus just played, well, do you see what he played? It's the simplest way to win the game. There are many moves you could play, but he simply played rook to d1, and he was in this position on move 33 that Max Warmerdam resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Capturing on f7 makes zero sense, as the g7 pawn is g7 square is covered by the bishop, and the only thing you can do is maybe move the knight, but then of course, you see the idea. It's the only winning move, but one that can be easily found if you're an amazing player, as you guys are, and that is rook captures on d3. Simply allow the pawn to march forward. That is the move that Magnus played, on move 15, and it would be the one that decides the game. E captures e2, you have to stop the pawn, rook a1 or rook c1, doesn't really matter. Pawn becomes queen, rook has to be sacrificed, and after rook captures, Magnus would be up a bishop in a completely winning endgame. Even if you capture on b7, it doesn't matter. A bishop is a bishop. They say a knight is a knight, but a bishop is a bishop. Of course, you also know who said that. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely done by Magnus Carlsen. Just, beautifully played after bishop g5. Completely new position. He just, how long did it take him to play it? Yeah, like 4 minutes. Yeah, 4 minutes. I mean, completely take over the game and just win very nicely. That's how Magnus does it, and that's how, we would all wish that we could do it, and that is how Alekhine will do it in the Sanremo saga when we get back to it in the next video. But also, yeah, I put a quote above the board. Who is your opponent tonight? Tonight I'm playing against the black pieces. Akiba Rubinstein's famous quote: Magnus was black here, but so will Akiba be against Alekhine in the next video that I make. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely played by Magnus, as usual. Thank you for suggesting such a wonderful game. I would like to thank Brian Baker, Michael Santos, Ryan Canus, Isaac Pinol Catadao, and Everett Mulder for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.